This is Real Estate Rookie episode 172.
I would have had a different life if I'd have had the Enneagram prior to. I mean, if I could have gone back to my 20s, I would have had a completely different life. And I mean better. And the people around me would have had a different life too. And I think, getting the people who are in your life personally on board as much as they're interested, the dividends that would pay, I can't even begin to tell you. I fully believe that's my area of passion for sure.
My name is Ashley Kerr, and I'm here with my co-host, Tony Robinson. In this week's Rookie Reply, we have a special guest for you guys.
Such a special guest that it almost felt more like a therapy session at one point than than like a regular Rookie Reply. But today we have Nick on the show, and Nick is actually an Enneagram expert. And when you hear Enneagram, it's a personality type tool similar to like the DISC profile or the Myers-Briggs. But this one's a little bit different, and Nick will get into what some of those differences are and why he feels that this one is actually a better tool to use in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, Nick actually sat down and spent an hour with each Tony and I and kind of went through what our type structure should be. So this was something that was very new to me. Did you ever do this type of testing, Tony?
No, Tyler Madden had mentioned it to me that he had gone through this before and got a lot of value out of it, but this was my first time doing it myself as well.
Yeah. I still can't pronounce it correctly. So as you notice through the whole show, I avoid saying the word the whole time. So
say the word now. Say it that way. Let's just get
Enneagram?
Woo! There he is.
Is that right?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, Enneagram.
Let's save that. We can insert it into different parts of the episode. Okay, so we are going to bring Nick on and learn what types Tony and I are, and also why this is important, what kind of value it can bring to your life and others. Nick, welcome to the podcast. We are very happy to have you on. Tony and I have both talked to you a little bit before this episode to kind of get some background. I would love for you to share with everyone who you are and why you are here today.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I know this isn't, your normal thing, but I think it's just one of those universal human things that'll make anybody more successful in the things they do, and that includes what you guys are up to. I've listened to several of your podcasts. I don't know the first thing about what you're doing. Well, I guess I now know the first thing about what you're doing, but that's about it. I am an Enneagram guide. I have dedicated the last several years of my life to it, and when I say dedicated, I mean maybe a little obsessively. And it is a tool, the best way to put it is it's a roadmap, a scaffold to understand ourselves authentically and others better, and in a way that is not boxing, putting you into a box and containing who you are. I think a few other of these tools that are valuable tend to do. So that's what I do with my life, is I kind of help people find their way to get the filters and the masks off of the little silent voices that are kind of always influencing us. And that's through the Enneagram. So
what exactly is that? Can you explain?
Great question.
And, break into it? Yeah.
No, you all know, don't you? Of course. It's and the Enneagram comes through antiquity. It goes all the way back to monks and, these Trappist monks way back, like 1,200 years ago, using this thing as a way of understanding our emotional habits, our focuses, the things that motivate us, and then that allows us to understand ourselves truly, and then understand others truly, and then like growth from that. And so way back when, all these years ago, hundreds of years ago, these monks had to live together. And I don't know about you, but living with a bunch of dudes who've taken a certain set of vows would probably be kind of challenging. And so they found that this was a tool that allowed them to get along authentically and happily. It was kind of lost. It was obscure for a lot of years, for centuries, and got kind of refound in the 19th century and really brought to life by some folks who are still doing it today as a sorter of personalities, but less that and more of an understanding and a roadmap of who we are.
How does this compare to the DISC profile or other personality tests that are out there?
Thank you so much for that question, because it's one I'm passionate about. I was specifically, I did all those things, but I was specifically a Myers-Briggs guy for a long time. And man, I would never fault anybody for finding value in it. It's incredibly valuable. I think where it's valuable is at a certain point on our path and our journey. And what I know about, a lot of people, but what I know specifically about this community is that, you guys are really about self-improvement, really about growing and not just staying stagnant. And I think if you're one of those kinds of people and you want to grow and it's essential to you that you grow, the Myers-Briggs is on that line at a place where, maybe if you don't understand what it is about you that makes you different, I think the Myers-Briggs can tell you really loudly and really accurately. I'm an ENFP, right? I'm emotional, I'm intuitive, I'm a thinker, I'm a perceiver, and I do thinking before I do judging, and I'm an extrovert more than I'm an introvert. And so you can start to really understand who you are. But as you hear me say all that, you also hear me putting these boxes around things. You're hearing me say you're an introvert, not an extrovert. You're this, you're not that. And I think there's a containment that happens there that's really good for kind of letting us understand our tendencies and our behaviors. The Enneagram speaks to our emotional habits. That's my favorite phrase. Where we go emotionally, we're really, if we're paying attention, usually pretty good at knowing our habits, but not our emotional habits. Where do we land emotionally just kind of out of habit? And the Enneagram also speaks to kind of our priorities, our driving emotions, and then it's through that. It says, well, because you tend to operate more out of fear than anger, for instance, you tend to kind of go this way. But the Enneagram allows you to say, I'm this kind of ENFP, right? It's about you, the individual. So you can put those things together. I'm a Myers-Briggs ENFP, but I'm a 7, an Enneagram 7. And that's the kind of ENFP I am. And it's more about who you are and less about what you do.
Just from my own personal knowledge, what are you on the Myers-Briggs?
An ENFP.
Yeah. Gotcha. What about you, Ashley?
Yeah. I have no idea.
Oh, you've never taken it before?
I've never taken it. No, I've done the DISC profile, but I've never taken the Myers-Briggs.
Okay. What are you on the DISC profile?
I don't even remember.
I don't know that I know anymore either. Yeah.
Ashley, you are no help. You're no help. So I'm on the Myers. Yeah, we got to get. I think it'd be cool to kind of have this as part of the conversation too. But on Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTJ. I don't really remember what all those letters stand for, but it's like the engineer or the scientist or something like that is what they call it. On the DISC profile, I know I'm a really high C, and then lower on like the D and the I. So you see some similarities when you look at some of these different personality tests, and I do see a lot of the same character traits in the Enneagram, as I saw in my kind of like examples of the Myers-Briggs or the DISC profile. But what I want to dig into, Nick, and maybe if we can kind of set the table for the listeners here is like the Myers-Briggs, right? It talks, like, are you intuitive versus judging versus this versus that? The DISC is like decisive and cautious, and I can't remember what the other ones are. What are the different kind of I don't know, I guess like categories of the Enneagram that people's personalities, motivations, et cetera, kind of fall into?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that's really fundamentally the difference, right? Is you're talking about kind of these in both those systems, in the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and others that are out there, that it is about kind of, do you lean this way or do you lean that way? Are you, more of a follower or more of a leader? And certainly those things are endemic to the 9 different types of the Enneagram. And again, Enneagram Ennea is the 9 part if you're into Latin. I'm not. But there are 9 kind of personality types and less personality types. And I use that phrase to try to relate to the Myers-Briggs and stuff, but it's really about these archetypes of certain types of humans, right? And those kinds of, again, motivational, like what motivates you and where your emotional habits are. So as an example, I'm a 7, and 7s are motivated by we're part of the fear triad. Okay, so you're either motivated by fear or anger or your heart. Okay, and as part of the fear triad, I tend to be an anxious person. I don't tend to be an angry person. In fact, I kind of struggle in situations where I should be angry, actually accessing it and doing that. But I'm always kind of anxious. Now, a 7 is gonna deal with that by immediately reframing it, finding a silver lining, and life's good, life's happy, we're always positive and optimistic. And from the outside, we tend to just sort of look that way. Whereas someone right next to me, who's an 8, right? So right near me on the Enneagram, is anger-based. And so when things come in their life that are challenging, they fight it. They get their shield, they get their sword, and they're going to go fight that thing. So it's really about that motivation, right? So you think about what I just said and the kind of complexity of it and how you would, parse that out into those little categories of ENFP or those other things in DISC. Like, how would you do that? We're talking about fundamental driving emotions in you. Like, where does that land in Myers-Briggs? Where does that land in DISC? And I think they can be complementary, but that's the fundamental difference, I think.
Just before we move on real quick, I did take a minute to look this up. According to the Tony Robbins DISC profile assessment, not to be confused with Tony Robinson profile assessment, I am a high I.
Makes sense.
I think that's what I liked about the Enneagram too, Nick, is that, like you said, the Myers-Briggs or the DISC, it talks a lot about how you act, but the Enneagram was more so, hey, here's why you act that way, which I think is a little bit more instructive, because if you understand your own motivations, I think it allows you to kind of do a better job of being more self-aware, right? And kind of controlling those weaknesses in your personalities a little bit better. So I don't know, are there other benefits to the Enneagram that I'm missing, or would you say that's like the real big thing that's kind of the driver there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed the center of it, but I think the piece that we maybe aren't talking about as much here that I think, especially to your audience, is a big deal, is how that involves itself when you start interacting with other people, whether that's personal or professional. Man, oh man. To me, the most liberating part of it is that ability to fully, authentically understand others, right? What are we always told? That the most empathetic thing you can do is put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? You put yourself in their shoes. And we do that out of great, goodwill. If we're being good people, we try. Well, if you do that, you're just putting yourself in their shoes, right? So all of your biases, all your life experience, all of your emotional habits, and then you go put yourself in their shoes and say, well, okay, I understand why they're... No, you don't. You understand how you would be, in that situation. And the Enneagram lets you actually understand them in their shoes, right? And it's I think one of those things, especially in business partnerships where things can be really, maybe a little less emotionally open, hopefully not, but sometimes, is like, sometimes things can feel like, well, if I said that, if I did that, it would be because I was really mad. It would be because I didn't give a crap. It would be because of these. But maybe if you understand this person's type structure, you understand that that's not at all what they're doing. Their motivations are just different than yours. You're a visionary, they're a detail person. So when they start pointing out the details that are gonna fall apart, they're not picking apart your dream. They're trying to help you understand, here's some stuff that might go wrong, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think the other value is in teams and in relationships, both business and professional.
So we talked about how it's important to be conscious of yourself from learning about your habits and what type of person you are, so you can be more conscious of your, your habits and how you interact with people. But you touched a little bit about relationships and like talking with other people, whether on their team. So do you ask people to go get this testing done, or do you memorize all these types and then try and figure out what type they are? How do you best approach that as to figuring out what someone's type is so that you can interact with them appropriately?
Man, what a great question. One of the cardinal sins for people in what I do is, it's you never type somebody, right? You should never ever say, "Oh, you're an 8," and I know that. So, and it's because that's as much putting somebody in a box as anything. But there can be a level of awareness, right? And so ideally, yeah, Ashley, you would. If you were on a team, I think it'd be incredibly valuable to get everybody to go at least do a tertiary, top level view and get some notion of what type structure they might be and share that. If you're on a team, I promise you, the payoff for that is going to be way higher just for like a day or an hour of reading. What you'll see come out of that on a team, I think, would be more than you could possibly imagine. That said, as you go through your life, yeah, you can't just encounter each person and be like, here's a test, I need you to take this. But you do, if you spend some time in it, even if you're just spending time on you and your type structure, we are all in various ways. We're all the Enneagram numbers. Okay, you can't be completely divorced from any part of it. You know, in the end, the Enneagram is the whole human experience. And so you kind of start to get a sense, right? If you meet somebody who, man, it just feels like every time you bring something up, they just want to fight you, and it seems like they like fighting you, and not just you. Everybody, they just kind of always want to fight. And those kind of people you can think, man, what a jerk. Probably someone who's an 8, you know, you don't know. But from that, you can really start understanding, like, the reason they're that way is because they really care. 8s deep at their core are the most, you know, soft jelly loving people, and they're super sensitive, and their way of dealing with that and making sure that everybody that they care about, whether it's on a work team or a family, they're going to go fight. And so if you can see it for what it is, then you'll see it for that, as opposed to, man, what a jerk. You'll see them fighting for a thing they care about. And so to that end, if you can start to kind of get that sense, you can start actually understanding people who aren't like you.
So it is important to not only understand your own type, but to have an understanding of the other types so that you can kind of look at somebody and say they may be this type. And that would be more beneficial than just memorizing what your type is and knowing that. But getting some knowledge and understanding of others is where you're going to get the real benefit.
Yeah, I would say you can break it into 2 parts. I would also say I would move from memorizing to having a relationship with who you are, because like you really start to understand that person. And I think that's part of the power of it, as opposed to some of those other personality disorders where, I'm an ENFP. This is a relationship with yourself. So that part, and you can just do that and you'll be a better person to everybody you encounter. You'll be more successful in every one of your interactions and in the things you do. You just won't have the filters and the silent voices you're not aware of impacting that. And you could just do that. And I think that'd be incredibly beneficial. But yeah, if you really want the max benefit of it, understanding the other types and understanding at least, you know, the types of people who are really close in your life, just on that level, I think that's an amazing opportunity to really turn up the dial on what you're capable of doing with others.
So Nick, not only did we bring you here to, educate our listeners on the Enneagram, but you also spent some time with Ashley and I separately, getting to know us a little bit and figuring out which of those 9 numbers we fell into. And I don't know about for you, Ash, but it kind of felt like a little bit like a therapy session, right? Like there was a lot of deep, very pointed questions.
Yeah, I texted my friend right after. I was like, I think I just had a therapy session.
So Nick, I think Ash and I would both love if we could, share with the listeners what what number category we fell into, and then just kind of have a discussion around like what exactly that number entails, and just kind of have a fluid discussion around it.
Sure, and I just to kick it off, that typing interview is so different than the work you would do once you're typed. And I totally, it's like I said it to both of you. It's like a police. You've got the light on you, and it's like an interrogation, and it's intense. So thank you both for doing that with me.
Well, the questions are hard. Like you really have to think about yourself. Yeah,
they are. So thanks for doing that. I appreciate you taking the time and being so open. I think what we landed on for both of you, which is really interesting to me, is an Enneagram type structure of 6. Ashley, there was a little bit more ambiguity with, because you have a lot of that kind of 7 energy. I'm a 7, so it takes one to know one. And I think what's interesting about that, though, and I was kind of hypothesizing with both of you, is I wonder if in communities of people like this who are driven to make their lives better and to find security, that you're going to encounter more 6s. I don't know, and here's why. 6s, as a type structure, their habit of mind is doubt, right? Doubt about, and again we go back to this is your root level. We all work to become better and not let these things own us. But 6s tend to kind of find themselves doubting things and then trying to find a way to have faith in those things. So 6s also can have the most faith out of any type structure, depending on where they are. And their driving emotion is, as I mentioned earlier, fear. So doubt and fear, and you're starting to hear these words. I'm going to time out for 1 second and tell you another thing I love about the Enneagram. It really doesn't pat you on the back. It doesn't say, you're amazing, because it pretty much comes in and says, here's what's probably a challenge for you, and the fun part of working on your type structure is reducing the impact of that. But yeah, as I continue to talk to you here in front of all your listeners, I'm probably going to tell you, the things that don't sound like rah-rah. And that's just kind of the nature of the Enneagram. That's just how it is. But your focus of attentions as a 6 is to find the hazards. And so this is all the bad stuff. But here's the thing that makes 6s so fundamentally amazing is that they have an almost supernatural ability to do that, to find the hazards in the world, see them coming, get a plan together to either mitigate it or completely avoid it, and do that specifically for their small circle of people. That's often their family, like their actual literal family, but 6s also kind of make families out of the people they want to. But they do this as much or more for those people as they do for themselves. And it is, if you see a 6 at work really doing their thing, it's supernatural. They can just see it all coming and plan and have it figured out before it gets there. So I felt a lot of that from both of you. And then after listening to some of your podcasts, it's clear that you're just doing that on a daily basis, which is why I wonder if your audience is overrepresented with 6s. But yeah, I think both of you are there. If I can just prattle on a little longer, Ashley, yeah. I think the Enneagram numbers, like I said, we're connected to all of them, but we're connected to kind of outside of our specific type structure 4 in stronger ways. So we have a number we'll slide to in stress, or some people say disintegration, and a number we slide to when we're kind of more calm, integration, some people say, and then we have wings. Okay, so the wings are just, you're going to lean to the right or the left. If you're a 6, you might lean 5. If you're a 6, you might lean 7. And I really feel, Tony, like you lean heavy to the 5, which is the engineer, as you mentioned. 5s are, my brother's a 5. He literally sends satellites into space. He owns a satellite company. And then the 7s are me, just too much energy, and I just make everybody uncomfortable. So it's that energy of positivity and all that. And Ashley really, talked about looking to the future, which is such a 7 thing to do, is to, have, plans, positive plans on the books, to have a positive spin on things. If things start getting stressful, yes, 7s stress. They're anxious just like 6s, but they go somewhere with that's more positive, try to keep it optimistic. And then 5s are these thinkers, and I don't think either of you are a 5 or a 7, but you definitely lean that way. And I think what's really interesting is how that shows up between the two of you.
That's why we make the best team as co-hosts.
I think so.
So, Nick, I want to talk a little bit about some of the limitations, or not limitations, but some of the personality quirks that maybe make it a little bit more difficult for 6s. Because as I was reading it, I think that was the part that kind of jumped out to me. So we talked about some of the strengths of being a 6, but what are some of the limitations, and how can Ashley and I mitigate some of those in our day-to-day lives?
Thank you. That's a great question. 6s, we talked about, what's interesting about 6s is they're the number I can think of, the type structure on the Enneagram that is the most, they're a dichotomy. Their strengths are their weaknesses, right? And that's so rarely the case. 6s are hyper-vigilant. End of story. And that's what makes them so amazing at preparing and making plans for their life and seeing things through and doing that. You know what else it does is it gets in their way. The anxiety, the thinking about all those things that can go wrong, it can lead to pessimism, it can lead to doubt, it can lead to these kinds of things, which kind of, and they can start to spin, right? So the thing that makes them amazing at being them is also the thing that holds them back. And in relationships, including and especially professional relationships, can just kind of slow down the train, can kind of get stuck and mired in that space. And they also can get, they're concerned with loyalty. And so they can find themselves in a distrusting place. And I think, anytime you're going to do something big in your life, if you're going to start a new partnership with somebody, we all have hesitancies because it's a big deal. But my goodness, if you're so wrapped up in the idea of this, if I can trust this person, will they be loyal? That can hold you back from a lot of things. And those are some major challenges that 6s face. And also, there can occasionally be a self-doubt piece that comes into that. If you ever are blindsided by something as a 6, man, oh man, can that land like how did I not see this coming? how did I not? I have this superpower. And that can really lead to self-doubt as well. And I think the amazing thing about growth in the Enneagram, as opposed to growth through other tools, is you're not addressing the fact that you're too introverted or whatever. You're addressing the fact that, man, here's this big thing that I'm always focused on, and how is that impacting the way I see everything? And so getting out of that can be really powerful.
What are some tools and resources that we can go to kind of learn how to, like, we're a type 6, but we want to be the best type 6 we can be?
Yeah, I sent you guys, hopefully you can post some links and things. To me, the authority where I've done the majority of my learning is the narrative Enneagram. They're kind of the OGs, if you will, of the Enneagram, and they're passionate. They keep updating not just their terminologies, but their ways of thinking about it. You heard me say a couple times throughout this, like, oh, some people use this verbiage and some people use that. They're always really thinking about how they're never done. And they don't think they have it figured out, right? And I think that's really amazing. And I've done a lot of stuff there. So thenarrativeenneagram.com. There's 2 books that really kicked off my journey, that changed my life. And that's The Path Back to You and The Road Between Us. Or I might have gotten the path and the road inverted on that, but it's something about roads. And so The Road Back to You and The Path Between Us. It's written by a couple of pastors, which is just from that perspective. You know, they're not at all... it's not from the perspective of that faith, but it's their life experience, it's their learned experience, and so they kind of share how it works in their world. So those are great places to start. And then I really feel like there is so much you can do with reading and tests and things, but there's just really no replacement for talking to somebody. So obviously me and people like me who can sit down and really work with you and your individual your type structure and understanding it and then lessening its impact. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So after you talked with us and we kind of identified our type structure, did you come into this interview knowing or having kind of a plan how to interact with us based on our type structure? And what does that look like? What is the best way to interact with a 6?
You know what's interesting? That's a great question. Thank you. Yes and no is the answer. You know, understanding type structures just automatically, as soon as if you've been in a while and you've invested in it, you understand a 6, right? And so I think just automatically, we'll go back to the Myers-Briggs here. My N means I'm intuitive, right? So you're either intuitive or thinking. So once you sort of have the understanding, I think you do on some level shift the way you speak. I certainly am not talking to you the way I talk to a 1 or a 3, but I don't think it changes the underlying. You know, it's maybe just speaking a slightly different language. And I think for 6s, it's letting maybe a little bit more of me out personally, because 6s want to know they can trust you. 6s want to know that you're a human being in this world with them. You know, if I came in like a 1, and 1s specifically are very detail oriented, they have a very loud inner critic, and they like look for everything that could be wrong. So different than 6s who look for things that could go wrong. And if I started kind of doing that and bringing that energy, I think there's a lot of that would make you guys feel a little less comfortable. So yeah, I think it goes back to that thing we talked about. If you understand other types, you can just sort of be in their space with them in a way that's a little more authentic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking, Nick, and it's like I feel like I should really just do like all of these with my wife and my son. My son's 14, so I think he's old enough to like get the value out of this. But how cool would that be if, as a family, we understand each other's Enneagrams, we understand each other's Myers-Briggs, their disc profiles, like man, what could that do to our relationship? So you know, I'm just thinking out loud right now. But man, what a cool. I don't think families do that enough, right? Understanding kind of where the other person's coming from.
Yeah, I think you think of it more of like teams at your work,
business,
but not in your family. Yeah.
Well, Tony, thank you. I mean, I know I'm here talking to this audience who has a specific interest, and this is a little off that topic. But boy, I think if I'm just going to be really blunt, that is the real motherlode of value in the Enneagram, is what you just said. I mean, I didn't mention it at the beginning. I was going to, but the way I found it is I found myself very suddenly and very unexpectedly divorced. And my life was just upended. And that's when the Enneagram came into my life. And I'll tell you, the number one thing I kept thinking as I just sort of started dipping my toes and then digging and digging and digging is I'm like, I would have had a different life. If I'd have had the Enneagram prior to, I mean, if I could gone back to my 20s, I would have had a completely different life. And I mean better. And the people around me would have had a different life too. And I think Yeah, getting the people who are in your life personally on board as much as they're interested. The dividends that would pay, I can't even begin to tell you. I fully believe that's my area of passion for sure.
I see these, and I don't know much about this at all, but like zodiac signs or your horoscope, things like that. Like I see things online where it's like, oh, if you're a Scorpio, you match with an Aquarius.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's another one. I just know I'm a Scorpio. But, and it's like you match well with that person in business wise or even relationship wise. Can you look at these types and, there's better people that you'll work with, or is it doesn't even matter at all? Because I saw on the one worksheet, it was like there was the mind, the body, and the heart, and some of them were categorized. Can you kind of go into that a little more too?
Yeah, thanks. So one of the ththings I really love about the Enneagram too is because it's treating us like people and not like computer programs that we can sort into different things, is that there's the somatic piece. So you really brought that part up, so our body part. And that is where we tend to process everything in our lives. So the head types, which is 5, 6, and 7, that's where we literally take the entire world in, we process it, and we do everything we do through our brains. And it rarely goes any lower. And if it does, we're not comfortable with it. I'm one. I totally get that. And then you move into just which way we're going to go. We'll go 8, 9, and 1. Those are the body type, the very bottom, and that's the anger type, right? That it comes from their belly, it rages. And someone like a 9, you bring that up to him, you say, "Oh, you're really anger driven," and like, "No, I'm never angry." That's exactly it. They're so good. Their entire life is driven by not being angry. Like if there's tumultuous situation, they're the ones who can slip their feet into everybody's shoes, make everything okay, and move along because like, man, I just don't want any anger. But it's still anger driven. And then there's the heart types, which I think all of us can kind of intuitively understand. And they just live their life through their emotions and and the things that make them feel warm or not so warm. And so, yeah, what's interesting is your question is there better mix matches for business relationships or personal relationships? And I think on some level, there is a natural tendency to find ourselves, a thinker and a doer. And we know that that's true. That like a lot of the strongest partnerships, maybe the strongest partnerships ever, Apple, right? Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Jobs was clearly the thinker and Wozniak was clearly the doer. And look what it did. And so obviously those are going to be two different types. I'm guessing Jobs was something like a 7, and I'm guessing that Wozniak was something like a 5. Now, I don't know, but so you're probably going to find yourself drawn to that. But I would challenge the notion that in the end, if you're both healthy, aware of your type structure, aware of each other's type structures, that there isn't a combination that wouldn't work. And I think it's about that commitment, that dedication to being the best blank you can be, being best 6 you can be. And I think from there, that's where I love the Enneagram, is because we are all individuals, and the Enneagram allows for and encourages you to just be who you are. And you can be two totally different people and both be 6s. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to comment on really quickly, Nick, you kind of apologize for talking about the personal aspect, like the, personal relationship aspect of the Enneagram. But man, I think that's super important, right? Like, even as like all of us who are investing in real estate, those of you that are listening to this podcast and want to start investing in real estate, you're doing so because you have this picture in your mind of what you want your life to be like. And for many of you, there's obviously the financial part where you have this financial freedom, this financial security. But I'm sure for everyone that's listening, there's also like a relational part of that picture of your life as well. And it's like, what good is building this big financial, castle if you're in there by yourself? And I think being able to really understand who you are as a person and how you work with other people is important. My wife and I, like I said, we haven't done this yet, but I definitely want to make her do it now. I say make her do it. I mean, like ask her to do it, because I'm sure I can't make my wife do anything.
The pants in that household.
Yeah, if you guys know my wife, I can't make her do anything. Um, but we read a book like in our mid 20s maybe, and it was called The Five Love Languages. And that book was super helpful for us as a couple because it gave us a better understanding of who the other person was. And we still literally use the language that we picked up in that book today about how we interact with each other. So this is me more so just like giving advice to everyone, right? Based on what's worked for me is like, if you can understand your partner, your romantic partner, your parent, your friend, whoever it is in a deeper way, it really does unlock a new level in that relationship.
Tony, I think that book even applies to business relationships too. I'm going to a real estate investor's wedding, and there's a whole group text going of his love language is gift giving. We have to do something awesome for him. And it's like that everybody's week is consumed trying to figure out what gift to give him. So I think like, it's a way to show appreciation too if you do go along with what somebody's love language is too, and not just in personal relationships. Yeah.
If I can piggyback off of that, man, if you're seeing and by the way, I was a love languages guy too. When I say that I've been into all these things, you guys are talking about in the love languages. I dig it, and I think you're seeing the value of just like these 5 little gift giver or words of affirmation, or and you see the value in knowing that, being conscious of it. And then, like you said, like, are you approaching your wife differently, Tony? Not consciously, but so just on a moment to moment basis, yeah, you are. You're not thinking, gift giving or whatever your wife's is. It's just there. And like, you just know. And so you're a better person to your wife. And if you could expand that infinitely, I mean, orders of magnitude, that's just what the Enneagram is, but on a richer, deeper level. And yeah, if you could understand your wife as a 4, my goodness, all the little details, all the nuances, all the minutia, you'd be so prepared to understand those things. And one other thing I just want to add is, you were talking about you guys are driven to build these castles because you have this picture of a life you want to get to. And in working with driven people like you guys, one of the things I most frequently work on is, how do you do the love part and the life part while you're on that train? Because you can work so hard and it's for these people that you love. It's not because you're selfish or ignoring them, but man, it can be possible to easily do that. And so some of the work is in understanding on the journey, before you get to that vision, how do we keep life working right now in a really positive, fulfilling way? So that's one of the things that the Enneagram's great at.
Man, Nick, this is where the therapy session kicks in, because what you're saying is like something that I struggle with, honestly. It's like I stopped working my W-2 job back in 2020, but I still do find myself working a lot, But the motivation is different now, right? Before is because, I wanted to keep my job. I wanted the next promotion. I wanted a raise. Now it's like, shit, if I'm not working, then who knows what's going to happen to my business, right? And there's this like insatiable desire to keep growing, because in that growth, I feel a sense of security, right? But also the reason why I don't ever want to go back to a day job is because I want that freedom and that flexibility of time, right? So it's like I have that choice, but a lot of days I'm choosing to really invest it into the business. And what makes it even more difficult is that I know my wife and my son, like, their love language is quality time. So I have to be very cognizant of this drive that I have and making sure that I'm keeping it in check, so that I'm not driven to the point that it decimates my relationships with the people that I love the most. So, man, this is, it's a really, really deep conversation, but one that I'm glad that we're having.
Well, I just want to point out, just for anybody who's being introduced to this right now, it was 20 minutes ago, I said, well, what do 6s, what's their emotional habit? What's their focus of attention? It's security in an unsafe world, and it's planning and all the doubt and and man, as you're talking there, I'm like, geez, are you just selling the 6 thing on purpose? Is it like, I want to make it clear I'm a 6, because you really just said all those things. And the power in that, and what's fun about how accurate that is man, can then then address it so specifically, right? Can you look it dead in the eye and start mitigating its impact? Whereas, what are you going to do with ENFP or INTJ, like you said you were? How do you take that as a tool and be like, I'm going to be better? But boy, would it be easy for you to look at the exact things you just said and know that that's a habit, and know that if you were doing any other job in any other place in the world, you'd still be struggling with that exact thing. And that, I think, is liberating, because it's like, well, I'm not a slave to it. And it's also empowering, because you're like, now I know what it is. I can go get it. And then folks who are driven like that aren't okay with it just sitting there. Once you know what it is, you're going to want to go tackle it. I just think it's so
Right.
great. I love it.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're very conscious of what your family needs from you. That instead of like, well, I'm working to make us tons of money so you can go and buy whatever you want, where that doesn't matter to them. Where you're finding that balance of spending quality time with them and being conscious of that, I think is just a huge thing.
That's also another big 6 thing, right? It's always, like I said at the beginning, it's less about them and more about the people they love every time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's funny. And I feel like you used the wrong words for me to bring this up, because I feel like it's on the wrong message. But when you care about somebody, like I took on a new business partner, and the excitement and the like just of him getting to quit his job was more of a motivator for me than me being like, oh, I can make this much money in this month. Like,
right.
I worked so much harder, I felt like, because I wanted to say to him, I told you could quit your job. No.
Right?
But at that, like how you just said that, like people you care about, your friends, your family, people that mean something to you is a huge motivator, and you care about that more. I definitely identify with that as a 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes back to that 6 thing of it's often and most often their actual family. But like I said at the very beginning of this, boy, 6s like to make their own families too. Like, yeah, you're my family now. And I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing whoever this business partner you have now isn't just a smart business person, a hard worker, probably are all those things. But I'm guessing, you were excited because that's my family. Like you've chosen this person to be someone in your circle as opposed to just here's a business opportunity. I'm guessing.
Yeah, and even Tony has brought me into his family too. If you look at his text messages, I am pinned at the top with a very the inner circle of family.
I mean, we're sitting with a couple 6s here, it looks like.
Nick, you shared like, man, so many good things, and I really hope everyone that's listening takes the time to go out and complete an Enneagram for themselves so they can get a better understanding of their own personality type. But I don't know, Nick, is there anything else we should know about the Enneagram, how it's useful before we wrap things up here?
I would just throw out the 80-20 principle has never been more true of anything in the world. You're going to get 80% of the value by just putting 20% into this thing, and you'll just be blown away. Now, my guess is that once you get that, you'll think, holy cow, what else can I do with this? And if so, pursue. Do it like you do with anything that's a tool in your life. But yeah, just if I promise, you have my word, that if you just do a tertiary top level thing with this, you'll already start seeing just amazing payoffs in your life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. Can you tell everyone where they can reach out to you or find out some more information?
Sure. The best way is just NB. I'm Nick Baumgart, so nbenneagram.com. There's a few resources there, but mostly it's just a way to get a hold of me. And then again, I would just lead everybody as much as I could to the narrative Enneagram. To me, they're just the authority out in the world. It's where I've learned almost everything I know. And then one last little thing. There are tests, and I think the best one is at the narrative Enneagram. You have to pay them like $10, but I would just say, because I mentioned that we're all connected to all the numbers, and we have these wings and we have these lines that we move to, taking a test, it can start to feel a little bit like astrology. Like every single one of these numbers sounds like me. And because to some degree that it is. So if you do take a test, I would say make sure that you read, and there's gonna be one that really nails you, and not in a good way. You're gonna feel like someone called you out on your crap, and you're not gonna like it. That's probably your actual type structure. But there's really no replacement for having the ability to have someone go through a typing interview with you, whether that's me or not, and being able to kind of get the subtleties and the conversation that you guys talked about, the therapy session to really kind of get in there. So by all means, take a test, but keep going.
Yeah, Nick, I have to say, talking to you was so much better. And like Tony said, a therapy session where for me to sit down and take a test, I would just rush through it to get it over with. And it probably wouldn't even end up being accurate because I would just want to get it done and over with and click through everything. So
or answer the way you want to answer, right?
Yeah. So I think it was a lot more intentional doing it, face to face or Zoom to Zoom and getting to talk with you. So thank you for taking the time to do that with both of us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
I'm Ashley at Wealth from Rentals, and he's Tony at Tony J. Robinson on Instagram. And thank you guys so much for joining us. We will be back on Wednesday with another guest. We'll see you next time. And remember, 6's rules and others drool.
I love it.